In the summer of 1942, the Second World War reached a decisive moment on the banks of the Volga River. The city of Stalingrad, stretching along the river in southern Russia, became the center of one of the most brutal battles in history. For months, soldiers fought among shattered factories, frozen streets, and burning ruins. The battle would claim hundreds of thousands of lives and would ultimately change the course of the war. For Nazi Germany, Stalingrad was meant to secure victory in the East. For the Soviet Union, it became a symbol of resistance and survival. What began as a strategic objective soon turned into a relentless struggle of endurance that captured the attention of the entire world. The road to Stalingrad. In June 1941, Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the massive invasion of the Soviet Union. German armies advanced rapidly, capturing vast territories and destroying large Soviet formations. Yet despite early successes, the campaign failed to defeat the Soviet Union before winter arrived. By the summer of 1942, Germany launched a new offensive toward the oil fields of the Caucasus. These resources were essential for sustaining the German war machine. To protect the northern flank of this operation, Hitler ordered his armies to seize the city of Stalingrad. The city also held symbolic importance because it carried the name of Joseph Stalin. Capturing it would provide a powerful propaganda victory for Nazi Germany and weaken Soviet morale. The German Sixth Army, commanded by General Friedrich Paulus, advanced toward the Volga River. By late summer 1942, German forces had reached the outskirts of Stalingrad. The bombing of the city. In the late summer of 1942, the Luftwaffe focused its power on one goal: crush Stalingrad from the sky. On August 23rd, hundreds of German bombers took off from airfields far behind the front lines. Their target was a long, narrow strip of industry and homes along the Volga River. The attack began in the late afternoon. The first waves of bombers appeared like dark clouds on the horizon. As they approached the city, the sound of engines grew louder, drowning out the everyday life below. People in the streets looked up, and many realized too late that something extraordinary was about to happen. The first bombs fell on the outskirts and on the railway lines. The explosions shook the ground, sending glass flying from windows and dust into the air. Within minutes, the scale of the raid became clear. The city was no longer being harassed, it was being systematically destroyed. The heart of the attack then shifted to the center of Stalingrad. Dense residential districts and working-class neighborhoods were hit first. The city's water and power systems were quickly damaged. Water pipes burst, electricity failed, and smoke spread across the sky. Factories were also targeted. The Red October steel plant, the Barricade gun factory, and the tractor factory were all marked for destruction. The plan was to turn Stalingrad into a dead industrial zone, stripped of its reason to exist. The raids continued for hours. German bombers dropped thousands of explosive and incendiary bombs. The incendiaries set large areas of the city on fire. The fires quickly spread from building to building, consuming entire blocks. In the evening, when the first wave of bombers had left, the city still burned. The flames reflected on the surface of the Volga River, turning the water into a dark mirror of fire. The sky glowed red, and the air filled with smoke and ash. Civilians were trapped in the inferno. Many had no shelters capable of resisting the blasts. Basements were often flooded, cellars were too small, and some people simply hid under stairs or in the corners of ruined buildings. The next morning, the city looked like a foreign landscape. Familiar streets were unrecognizable. Walls had collapsed, roofs had vanished, and narrow paths formed between heaps of rubble. The dust and smoke still hung in the air, making it hard to see and breathe. Despite the destruction, the city was not abandoned. Soviet authorities refused to allow mass evacuation. The political symbol of the city's name, Stalingrad, was too important. The decision was made. The city would be defended, even as it burned and froze. German commanders believed that the bombing would break the will of the defenders. Instead, it hardened their determination. The ruins created a defense in depth, with every fragment of stone and steel becoming a potential hiding place or firing position. Fighting for every street, Joseph Stalin ordered that the city must not fall. Soviet forces under General Vasily Chukov prepared to defend every part of Stalingrad. The battle quickly became close-quarters urban warfare. Soldiers fought inside buildings, staircases, and basements. Opposing troops were often separated by only a few meters. Snipers became an important part of the battle. Among them was the Soviet sniper Vasily Zaitsev, who became famous for his skill and determination. Factories such as the Red October steel plant, the Barricadi gun factory, and the tractor factory became heavily contested strongholds. These locations changed hands many times during the fighting. German soldiers called this brutal urban combat Rattenkrieg, or Rat War, because of the constant fighting in ruins and underground spaces. Life in the ruined city. In the months that followed the bombing, Stalingrad became a place of survival as much as a place of war. The once busy streets were now filled with rubble, broken vehicles, and abandoned household objects. The city no longer looked like a human settlement. It resembled a broken shell tossed between two armies. Civilians who had not been evacuated lived in the cracks of this shattered world. Families moved into basements, cellars, and half-collapsed buildings. These spaces became their homes, workshops, and hospitals. People cooked on small fires, slept in improvised bunk beds, and tried to maintain some sense of daily life. The Volga River became a lifeline. On the eastern bank, Soviet supply lines prepared to support the city's defenders. Small boats, barges, and even makeshift rafts crossed the river at night, loaded with ammunition, food, and reinforcements. The journey was dangerous, with German artillery and aircraft constantly threatening the crossings. On the western bank, within the city, food was extremely scarce. Rations were cut to almost nothing. Soldiers and civilians alike often ate only a few slices of bread, some soup made from straw or weeds, and the occasional piece of meat when supplies allowed. Hunger became a constant companion for everyone in the ruins. Winter deepened the misery. Temperatures fell far below zero. The city had no central heating, and most buildings were open to the sky. People wore whatever clothing they could find. Multiple layers of worn jackets, scarves, and sometimes even sheets and blankets wrapped around the body. Frostbite spread across fingers, noses, and toes. Medical care existed only in fragments. Doctors worked in dark cellars or factory basements, with little light, little medicine, and little equipment. Small electric lamps, candles, and kerosene lamps provided the only illumination. Bandages were reused, and medicines were shared like precious gold. Civilians played a greater role than most people today imagine. Women, older men, and even teenagers dug trenches, carried ammunition, and helped pull wounded soldiers from the ruins. Some operated heavy machinery in factories that still ran, producing weapons and equipment even as the buildings around them shook from explosions. Children adapted to the nightmare in their own way. They learned to move quietly through the ruins, to avoid open areas where snipers could see them, and to recognize the sound of approaching aircraft. For many, the idea of a normal childhood had vanished. School was replaced by survival, games by scavenging, and toys by fragments of metal and glass. The psychological pressure was immense. The sound of artillery never completely stopped. Whenever the guns quieted for a few hours, people feared that a new attack was about to begin. Sleep was interrupted by explosions, alarms, and the constant movement of soldiers and workers through the city. The Soviet counteroffensive. By October 1942, German forces controlled most of Stalingrad. Soviet defenders held only narrow areas along the Volga River. However, German forces had a critical weakness. The flanks of the Sixth Army were defended by Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian units that lacked strong equipment and support. Soviet commanders prepared a large counteroffensive known as Operation Uranus. On November 19, 1942, Soviet armies launched massive attacks north and south of the city. Artillery bombardments opened the way for tank and infantry advances across the frozen steppe. Within days, the Romanian defenses collapsed and Soviet armored units pushed deep behind German lines. The encirclement, Festung Stalingrad. By the time the Soviet counteroffensive closed around the German Sixth Army, the situation around Stalingrad had changed beyond recognition. The city itself was still raging with fighting, but the decisive battlefield had shifted to the open steppe that ringed the city. Operation Uranus, the Soviet plan, was designed to take advantage of weak flanks. German forces were concentrated inside Stalingrad, while the armies guarding their sides were made up of Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian units. These formations were less equipped, less supplied, and less prepared for the kind of armored assault that was coming. The Soviet offensive began on November 19, 1942. In the north, Soviet forces struck the Romanian Third Army. In the south, they attacked the Romanian Fourth Army and the Italian Eighth Army. The goal was not to fight through the city, but to drive deep behind German lines and cut off the Sixth Army. The The first days of the attack brought chaos to the Axis defensive line. Wave after wave of Soviet tanks and artillery crashed into the Romanian positions. The defenders tried to hold on, but they lacked the heavy weapons and reserves needed to resist such a concentrated assault. Within a few days, the flanks collapsed. The Soviet armored spearheads pushed forward with remarkable speed. T-34 tanks, infantry, and supporting artillery raced across the frozen steppe, leaving behind pockets of isolated Axis units. On November 23rd, the two Soviet thrusts met near the town of Kalach. The pocket around Stalingrad was officially closed. The German Sixth Army, along with smaller units of Axis allies, found themselves trapped between the ruins of the city and the Soviet Ring of Steel. From the point of view of the German High Command, the situation was unprecedented. The loss of an entire field army was not something that had been seriously considered in the planning of the campaign. Yet the maps on the walls of Berlin and the headquarters in the east now showed the shape of the encirclement. Adolf Hitler refused to accept the reality. He issued an order that the Sixth Army was to hold its position. The city was to be defended at all costs. The trapped army was not to attempt a breakout, but to stay in place and await relief. The promise of relief came in the form of a counterattack from the outside. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein was given the responsibility of leading this effort. His forces were to push toward the trapped army and open a corridor. The operation was technically complex and politically loaded. Winter in the pocket. The winter of 1942 to 1943 in Stalingrad was not only a season, it was a weapon. The cold, the snow, and the wind combined with hunger, disease, and exhaustion to create a form of warfare in which the environment itself seemed to fight against the trapped German forces. The temperatures dropped to well below freezing. In some nights, the mercury fell to 30 or 40 degrees below zero. The wind carried the cold through every crack in the ruins, turning the city into an open freezer. Men woke up covered in frost, their clothing stiff with ice. The German supply situation became catastrophic. The promised airdrops never brought enough food, fuel, or ammunition. The crates that did arrive often fell in no man's land, behind Soviet lines, or in places where they could not be reached. The soldiers inside the pocket lived on diminishing rations, sometimes less than a quarter of a normal daily allowance. Horse meat became a crucial source of food. The number of horses, however, was limited. As the animals were slaughtered, the situation grew worse. Men ate whatever they could find. The last pieces of bread, the remains of canned goods, even leather boiled into soup. Malnutrition spread across the ranks. Medical conditions deteriorated rapidly. The wounded could not be evacuated. Hospitals inside the pocket were overcrowded and under-equipped. Doctors operated without sufficient anesthetics, without enough bandages, and without enough assistance. The cold made healing more difficult and infections more frequent. Frostbite became one of the main enemies. Soldiers who spent hours in exposed positions without proper hand protection lost fingers, toes, and parts of their limbs. The pain was intense, and the treatment was often limited to amputation or leaving the injury to its fate. The cold did not care about rank, age, or experience. Some German soldiers began to question the logic of the order to hold their positions. They saw the Soviet ring tightening, the Luftwaffe unable to deliver enough supplies, and the weather making any breakout attempt almost impossible. The idea of surrender, once unthinkable, became a whispered possibility. Yet the leadership still insisted on resistance. The concept of a Festung Stalingrad, a fortress city, was invoked to justify the continuation of the struggle. The soldiers were told that their sacrifice was necessary for the survival of the broader German cause. The Soviet forces surrounding the city also faced winter hardships. The open steppe offered little cover. Trenches filled with snow, dugouts became cold, and supplies sometimes struggled to reach the front lines. But the difference was crucial. They were on the outside of the encirclement, not the inside. The final collapse and surrender. By January 1943, the German Sixth Army was no longer a functioning field army in the traditional sense. It was a surviving remnant, scattered across the ruins of Stalingrad, trying to hold on to small pieces of ground in a city that had become one vast battlefield. The Soviet final offensive began with a massive artillery barrage. Thousands of guns opened fire along the entire perimeter of the pocket. The noise was overwhelming, the ground shaking under the impact of shells. The ruins of the city trembled as if they were alive. The Soviet infantry advanced behind this curtain of fire. They moved from one shattered building to the next, from one rubble pile to another. The tactics were simple but brutal. Isolate pockets of German resistance, attack, and then move on. The Germans had neither the manpower nor the ammunition to hold large areas anymore. In some districts, the fighting became house to house, room to room, even stairwell to stairwell. Snipers and machine gun teams held positions that could be measured in meters. The space between opposing forces sometimes shrank to only a few feet. The outcome was decided by whoever still had the strength to pull a trigger or throw a grenade. The German command understood that the situation was hopeless. The breakout attempts had failed. The air supply had collapsed. The winter conditions had destroyed much of the army's combat effectiveness. The Soviet forces had not only encircled the city, they had also stripped away its mobility and its reserves. Friedrich Paulus, the commander of the Sixth Army, was under immense pressure. He had been promoted to the rank of General Feldmarschall, a distinction that was supposed to bind him to the image of a German field marshal who would never surrender. The order from Berlin was clear: fight to the end. The Battle of Stalingrad became one of the deadliest battles in human history. Over 5 months of brutal fighting, more than 1 million soldiers and civilians were killed, wounded, or captured. The destruction of the German Sixth Army marked a major turning point in the Second World War. For the first time, a large German force had been completely defeated. For the Soviet Union, Stalingrad became a symbol of sacrifice and determination. From that moment onward, the Red Army began pushing German forces steadily westward. In the frozen ruins along the Volga River, the course of the war had changed forever.